So now I'd like to introduce to you Amisha Ghadiali, who I first met when we were both members of Compass, which is a progressive political think tank. And at that time, Amisha had just published the first edition of her book, The Future is Beautiful, which included a lot of the democratic and civil society projects that Compass championed. Even so, I was very drawn to the challenge of that title, The Future is Beautiful. How can you actually know that? Of course, that is the question that really resonates today as we sit in the midst of our global pandemic, isolated most of us from our communities, and with a very volatile global reality. So at that point, I'd like to welcome Amisha. Great to see you here, Amisha. Recommend that we all go to Speaker View now, which is in your top right-hand corner. And just invite Amisha to start by explaining how do you see the present moment, Amisha? And where do you get your sense that the future is beautiful? Where could that be arising from?
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Indra, for inviting me here, and also for the space that you've created with the elephant and with the alternative. And I very much enjoyed the gathering that we had of the blind folk last year, and being able to see where some of these different pieces come together of the parts in which we're all offering. And this time that we're in, this year, it feels very much like, a dark night of the soul, or like the winter when things are dying that we knew were going to die, because we've seen that they aren't working, that they aren't serving our communities, they aren't serving our environment, they aren't serving what is beautiful about the human way of life in relationship to the ecology in which we live. And deaths are never easy processes, where but they happen all the time, and I think the seasonal analogy is quite helpful, because we have, we've just here in the UK, it's been summer and it was warm and everything's been blooming, and already the leaves are starting to fall, and we know that things will look kind of barren in the weeks to come, and that will take us into a new blooming when the time is right. And it feels like, as a global society, in terms of systemic change, that this is really a turning point for all of us to really recognize where things aren't working, and wherever we've been prepared to look the other way, or ignore something, or just accept that this is how it's always been done and how it will always be done. I feel like what's come to the surface during this time is that wherever there were issues, they have all been exacerbated this year, and that has brought to the surface both the kind of the desperation of this moment, and the need for us to trust something that is much deeper within all of us, and that this is what happens through the power of vision. And it's interesting, this title, The Future is Beautiful, because I'm still slightly uncomfortable with it, I have to admit. And I started this project, and it was initially called Think, Act, Vote, and it was a decade ago, in 2010. It was an election year, and I was feeling that it was the first election in my lifetime that I was not excited about. And I had been one of those, strange kids that loved to stay up late and watch elections, and had my coloured scarves, and really felt the possibility of where power could shift something in all of our lives. And And I studied politics at university. I went on to work in politics, and unfortunately, that place of where I'd seen that this power, you know, could shift our lives for the better. My experiences of being inside were not of that, and I was working very much on that you know, the people that are in there need to change in order to be able to change the system. And what I found personally, and I have huge admiration and respect for those that are able to be in mainstream politics and make significant changes and really hold true to their values and their vision. But for me, I found that it was actually killing something that was very fundamental to my humanity, and actually kind of depressing me. A turning point being one night in the pub in Westminster. The young researchers would spend a lot of evenings in the pub, which is quite worrying in itself, really, because it's a serious job, you know. And one night somebody turned around to me and said, you know, we were arguing about something, and I was putting forward something that I thought was important in the discussion, and somebody just turned around to me and said, do you know what, Amisha, your problem is you care about people too much to do well in politics. And for me, that was like oh, like, what am I, you know, how is this the reality, and what is this system doing to us? And so then that allowed me to understand that it's a system rather than a group of humans, and there's a difference in that, in the way in which we relate. And so for me, what became really important was to really be able to hold true to my own values, and to understand my values and vision as a way of creating systemic change. And this started out quite, I'd say, casually. I didn't know that I was embarking on a project that I would still be part of a decade later. But what we did was very simple. We built a ballot box, and I say we. I managed to persuade a couple of friends to get involved, and we built this beautiful ballot box. And I just started with this question: what is the future you choose? Because one of the things that I was finding is that we can get so complacent, and it's not like our fault. It's to do with the system in which we live, and the way in which the media operates, and what we're told we're capable of doing, and what we're told is our place or not our place, and what we're told is the way things have to be. And that holds us back from actually being able to listen deeper to what it is that we can see and that we can bring into being. And very simply, I just felt like, oh, this is the first election in my lifetime that I'm not excited about. The choices don't feel like they're offering anything, and it's not really going to make a huge amount of difference, like what happens here. And this is really depressing. And I wanted to encourage people to vote, but I also wanted to encourage a deeper inquiry into like why we vote. And what I had understood is that when I was growing up, I saw politics and the political party as a vehicle that would carry my vision into being. And so I would place my vote, my support of this party, and I would be entrusting them to bring that vision into the world. And what I was seeing in 2010 was that was no longer the case, that the purity of politics, if it ever existed, had got so corrupted by, you know, corporate interests and all of these different aspects, that we come to just accept that it's fine that they interfere with how decisions are made and where the emphasis is on decisions. And that there was no longer anybody that I felt was anybody or any party that was holding a vision that matched a vision that I was holding of how not only I wanted my life and my future to be, but the future of this world. And with that, an integration of how we care for the planet and how we care for each other and how we understand our responsibilities, you know, nationally and globally, and how we understand the very complex history of why we have the issues between countries that we have, and therefore, you know, just the attitude that we are able to carry through with that. And so all of that was somehow behind this very simple act of building a ballot box and just popping up at loads of events and asking people to vote with their vision, and just simply said, what is the future you choose? And it was so interesting, because what I found was that as I was asking people to vote with their vision, it was almost like most people that I came across were completely like paralyzed by the question, like, what? Like, I can think about the future that I want, like, I don't know, you know, or it would just be like, well, you know, love and peace. And I'm like, yeah, and what if we go a bit deeper into that? Like, what does that actually mean? What does that look like? What does it feel like? What are some of the specifics around it? And so I did that project through the election year, and it was a creative activism project as well. So bringing in my sort of world of, I was working in sustainable fashion as well at that time, because I'd seen sustainable fashion as a vehicle of systemic change, that through understanding where an item of clothing comes from, how we treat it and how it's created, we understand how the world works. And it's like a simple thing that if we can shift that, we're kind of shifting a huge aspect of the way in which our world is set up, and how we treat people and the planet, and also how we care for things that are in our own lives. And so we brought in all these different like bits of creative activism into this project, and then it turned into a book. And I then started to interview people and ask them to share, you know, what is the vision what is the future that you choose? What is your vision of the world that you want to live in? And then, like, how can we create it? And so using the think, act, vote structure, it was like, what's a think? Something that's inspired that vision. You know, what's an act? Something we can all do in our daily lives. It doesn't cost anything. And what's a vote? Something we can support, whether it's a political party, it often wasn't, or an NGO or a community project. And really, like, the point of it all was to empower everyone that came into contact with this project to believe in the beauty of their own vision, and to believe in the innate worth that they have, and then how this can be, you know, how you can actually inspire others through your commitment to your vision. And so we had this book, and actually the first version of the book was called The Future We Choose, which was made in 2012 and launched at the Rio Plus 20 climate conversations. And then I was just sitting with it, and it's like, it's one of those things, it's like I kind of forget about this book sometimes, and then every time I re-look at it, like I was re-looking at it this week in the context of where we are at now, and I was just like, oh, this is such important work that we need to always be reconnected to that vision that we have. And I renamed it in 2016, The Future is Beautiful. And I'm not exactly sure why that happened. It was actually a friend of mine who is I think on his Twitter bio, it used to say something like grumpy optimist. And we were talking one day, and I said, I think I'm going to rename that book, The Future We Choose. It's just not sitting with me somehow. And he said to me, why don't you just name it what you want to name it? And I was like, well, what is that? And he said, The Future is Beautiful. And I was really like, am I allowed to do that? Because, you know, I think also being aware that I was a woman and a woman of color, and that when I say things, they're taken in a certain way that's perhaps different than if a white man was to say that. And And this was a white man that said this to me, and you know, and the founder of a very successful social enterprise. And I was like, yeah, you're right, that is what I'm saying. I'm saying that we can believe in the beauty of our visions, and that we can, that, you know, that all is not lost, that no matter what happens, all is not lost, and that beauty, which is that transcendence of the human nature, it's that ability to see what is working, what is powerful within a moment, within a situation, as well as to be able to see beyond it, and to not just accept and settle for what we've been given. And I feel like beauty has such power, and it's this, you know, it's like this soft power that Indra talks about. It's the power that connects us to the politics with the small p, that reminds us why we're here, and that it doesn't really matter like what challenges we're facing, that when we're able to connect to that beauty, to that vision, to our worth, and to that belief that that's when like all of that change is possible. And for me, what's then happened from there is a whole journey of where inner transformation and systemic change go hand in hand, and a whole journey around how we can't afford to live in silos. And this was something that I'd also found very troubling in the worlds that I was living in, that I was very active as a political campaigner, as a sustainability campaigner. I was also exploring mystic traditions as I was trying to understand why I'd experienced so much death in my life, and that these groups of people and the language between them was completely different. And what I could see was that fundamentally it's all connected to the same thing, and that what wasn't working for me was having to like narrow myself to fit all the time, and that I wanted to be like a whole person wherever I was. I wanted there not to be like a distinction. I wanted to be able to use like my whole brain, or you know, in yoga we might even say like the body mind, like the intelligence that is kind of greater than just one particular aspect, that allows us to see the interconnection more. And so when I turned The Future is Beautiful into a podcast, for me, one really important aspect of that was this weaving and this living beyond silos, and this place where politics, spirituality, sustainability or regeneration, creativity, you know, where it all comes together in what it is to be a human.
I've got to unmute myself there. I love that expression that you're sharing with us, and I can feel it actually as you're speaking it, that this idea that, you know, your own imagination, or in a sense your own consciousness, starts to be the thing that you are living, and not so much following, although that might even be the right term. Because after all, if we're not developing this space, then we are often following something else, or something that we haven't generated ourselves, you know, such as the way that the media influences us. And I felt particularly at this time, and that is what soft power is, it's the power of attraction. So if you're not really, in a sense, generating your own field of attraction, it's very easy to be pulled into one that is stronger than yours. And I feel that's the basic condition of so many of us today, that I feel it on a daily basis myself, this fear, a growing sense of fear, you know, no matter how much, you know, you fight against it, when really big things happen in the world, like the pandemic, you know, or you see global leaders toppling, or the worst kind of behavior, you know, in people with the greatest power and so on. It's very destabilizing. So can you describe a little bit more, Amisha, how you, because I know that you have, so you do the podcast and you invite into your space and cross the silos, as you put, many different kinds of practitioners. But you also develop that space for people who, you know, have never made an impact, particularly in the public space, but also are developing their own spheres, their own self-power, their own consciousness. So what is that practice? Can you share that with us and let people know how you help people develop what you yourself have developed?
Yeah. I guess for me, like, everything that I have learned or come to understand, I have shared along the way, and it's always been something that's very like alive and with other people. And for me, when I was working in more kind of traditional politics and sustainability and social enterprise, my whole way of doing it was what I'd been taught, which led to me feeling often really burnt out and often really depressed and often not enough, and often just really depleted, and that wasn't working for me. And so through what never, obviously, I think a lot of practitioners say that they never intended to to share practices, to be a facilitator. They just needed to learn something for themselves. And for me, I had a very clear realization in 2012, having been quite ill, and I'd already had like a few near-death experiences, and some big kind of messages that had shown me that I needed to integrate a different way of being into how I operated in the world, and a way that was more feminine, and not in like not meaning womanly, but just that had more of an emphasis on listening, and more of an emphasis on like kind of seeing where things interconnect, and also really respected the power of like being centered and building my resilience, but not in a like kind of tough way, but in a real like inner way. And so through a lot of yoga teacher trainings and spending time with mystics and doing some excellent courses, and just like opening myself up to a whole kind of different way of relating to the world, I started to offer those kinds of spaces, whether it be at retreats or workshops or an online community, which has been really powerful during this year, and also one-to-one work, which is very centered around letting go of the subconscious patterns that keep us stuck in that fear, and that keep us really stuck in the conditioning, in what we've been told, how it's supposed to be, what our parents wanted for us, what our grandparents wanted for us, like what's proper, and that actually free up a much deeper connection with something in ourselves that is much more, I kind of want to say individual, but it's both something that is like unique to us, and something that is far more connected to a bigger picture, because it operates on a different kind of intelligence. And so for me, that work has been really, really powerful, because I believe that these times require more of us, and they require us to be able to operate with more discernment and to kind of know what to believe and not what to believe. You know, people talk about this being like the time of post-truth, or, you know, the time of fake news or conspiracy theories, or, you know, whatever it is. And so how do we navigate within all of that? How do we navigate where there's so much? You know, we're also told this is like the age of information, where we are some ways infiltrated, exposed to far more information than humans have ever been on a daily basis. And, you know, how do we process and all of that? And how do we deal with the you know, this pandemic has really highlighted like where our communities are broken, or where you know, where there's loneliness. But that's not something that's just of this pandemic. You know, we're living in a time with very high rates of mental illness, with very high rates of suicide, with a lot of people struggling because we don't have what we need embedded into our society and into our systems. And so for me, it's just felt really important to offer that which connects us kind of deeper to ourselves, as well as what's possible for us to create in the world. And so one of the ways in which I've been doing that is, you know, this year I've been writing a book on intuition, and it's been really quite an amazing thing to be contemplating during this pandemic, and understanding the science of intuition, and understanding, you know, what has kept us separated from our intuition culturally, that it's almost become, you know, it's this thing that's seen as like woo woo or weird, or, you know, like fantastical, when it's such a core part of what it is to be a human. And it always has been throughout time. But there's a lot of, you know, really intense history of people, of cultures that have been wiped out that were more, you know, intuitive. That's what we've learned from colonialism, from the witch hunts, from all of this stuff. And so we've been cut off from a part of ourselves that actually has a lot of the information that we need on an individual level, and also in the recreation of a new paradigm, a new story, a new system for our communities, for our politics. And so for me, this is just something that's just felt so important, that this is a time where it's like we just have to not care anymore what anyone thinks of us, especially when that judgment is often coming from a really small, narrowed, conditioned perspective, and really free ourselves to be able to show up in the world with the worth that it just is. It is like, we're here. And it's, I always think it's quite miraculous when you actually understand like how many of your ancestors had to survive in order for you to be here. And if any of you have also been on like fertility journeys, or, you know, a lot of kids don't make it, you know, and it's like, here we all are, like people that are here, that have made it, that have survived through previous pandemics and wars and illnesses and all kinds of things, and we're here. And so just that in itself means that we have agency, and just that in itself means that what it is that we can see when we just like, we just let go of the cynicism and the fear and the kind of constantly trying to put us in little boxes that is so prevalent in this culture, and especially when you're in the worlds of like politics and even social change. I mean, I found it quite suffocating, because it's like, come on, like, why can't we lift each other up? Why can't we allow each other to be more, rather than always trying to like push each other, you know, smaller? And so for me, that's a really big part of what this time is. And I feel like there are so many people that have, you know, really quite dark, selfish visions of the future that they are creating, and they have the the conviction behind it. And so why not those of us that have visions that are connected to the beauty that's possible in this world? You know, we need to have that conviction behind it.
Absolutely, that's a wonderful provocation, actually. Why not? So I'm going to invite everybody to, if you'd like to ask Amisha a question, just put your name actually into the chat box, and I'll call on you in the order that you have put your names in, and you can ask Amisha your question yourself. And while you're thinking about whether or not you do have a question, I'm just going to ask Amisha one more thing. And it's not a question that I've prepared her for, so it might not be that easy to understand, but or to answer. We're all grappling with it, really. But you know, since we met 10 years ago at the campus offices, do you feel that you're beginning to get any sense that there is a politics that could come out of this practice that you're describing? Not that I'm asking you to sketch it out and say, you know, this is how it will work, but just some basic bits and pieces, or, you know, bits of architecture or some sort of structure, anything that you can see that adds up to something that is a new politics arising out of this stance that you're adopting, you know, of that we have, you know, we have this power ourselves to trigger a beautiful future. How could that be supported in a political way?
Yeah, good question. I feel like there's two ways that this work can do that. One is that for those that are already there, that are in the political, in whatever way that is, that hopefully when they come into contact with this, and with really like the power of their vision, and are able to learn how to listen more and to embrace what's possible more, and that can be a really good source of like sustenance for those that are in the existing systems that we have and that are already there. And then I feel like the other thing that's really interesting or exciting is that there are a lot of people that I've never really thought about this, but we have the 108th episode coming up for the podcast. So I asked people as a celebration, we were going to do it for the 100th episode, but then not enough people sent them in, and then 108 is like a special number in like yoga, so we decided to celebrate that one, and it's an auspicious number. And so I've been asking people to share, you know, after 4 years of this podcast, like what's it done? You know, like how has it actually shaped people's lives? And what's been really interesting is just getting some of those answers back. And also, as you're asking me the question, I'm just reflecting on conversations that I've had over the years, and actually I think from this perspective, more people have felt called to get involved in whatever way that they can, you know, and whether that's standing for the council or getting involved in that sense, or whether that's really showing up in community in a different way, whether that's starting something, you know, that needed to be started, or whether it's even like taking over something that had lost its kind of energy and needed, you know, enlivening. And so I think that staying connected to what's possible, and to knowing that there's communities of people around the world that are doing inspiring things, that believe in their visions, it really does have an activating quality to it. And I guess for now, that's where I feel comfortable with my own, with my own contribution. and that may change over time. You know, when I sort of step back from politics in my early 20s, which my mid 20s, I guess, I was like, well, I'll come back and be an MP when I'm older, which I thought was around 40, which is just a couple of years away. So definitely I don't feel older yet. But I you know, I don't know, like that also might be happening as more of us are shifting in our values of what it is that we accept, that it might be possible that more of us could go into a more of the central political place with that what's the word, it's not commitment, but just really with that real sense of what's okay. And I think for me, before this 10 years, I always felt like there's something wrong with me in those settings. Like, well, why can't I just accept this? And why can't I just toe this line? And why can't I just accept that it's like this? Why does this bother me? And I feel like what's happening that could be really exciting is that as more of us kind of rise into a real understanding of actually what really is acceptable, you know, and step away from just because it's always been like that, it just doesn't mean it's okay, and then can come forward with that conviction, then who knows what's possible.
Thank you. I think that actually segues very well into the first question that we've got in the box here from Parmjit. And Parmjit, are you there? I wonder if you'd like to ask your question to Amisha directly, if you unmute yourself. There you go.
Hi, Amisha. That was a lovely, inspiring talk. Thank you. I'm just wondering whether there are enough young, well, they don't have to be young, but I imagine that mostly they will be younger people in the political system at the level of being an MP that would be willing to stand up for this alternative type of politics, because I know at least one in my constituency, and she's a young Asian girl as well, actually. I can just imagine that 10 years down the road, she's going to just be worn out trying to kind of do all the stuff she's trying to do in this system that's broken. So I'm just wondering whether, you know, could we identify enough alternative thinkers at that level? Certainly in a village called Frome, there have been alternative councillors. And so once we kind of start to build up a critical mass in the various layers, then maybe something can happen. But in a way where we're trying to work within a broken system. So I'm not really sure whether, I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I think Indra might know more about this because it's a lot more of the perspective in which she's looking at the world and having conversations with people than I am. But I think there's one thing that you said, and you know, about the MP that is in your constituency and the burnout thing. I think in the new paradigm, it's not about like one person like going out and being like that kind of savior. Like there is like a community, a sense of collaboration, a sense of, you know, lifting each other up, and within that being able to acknowledge when people need to rest. And you know, it's a different way of being. I don't think we're there yet.
No,
especially not in this country. Like we're just not there yet. But that doesn't mean that it's not happening in small ways. And it doesn't mean that it won't happen. And I come across a lot of young people that are quite interested in getting involved, that have a lot of energy to like get involved in that kind of yeah, it's just, it's in I guess in the fight, like it's still in that place where it's in the fight, and that will attract certain kinds of people, and then when things have shifted, there'll be like other kinds of people attracted. And so I guess if everyone is being true to like themselves and their vision, then they are in the right place, if that makes sense. And then when it's their time, they'll step further in, or kind of that there are people stepping in now. But I don't know. I mean, I think Indra, you maybe can offer more.
Yeah, I mean, funnily enough, that Pamjit should talk about Frome, because in fact you do know the politicians in Frome, Peter McFadden and so on, and that is really a model of communities coming together first of all. And developing relationship between them. I think that everything Amisha's talking about is having the space to do that. So whether you're developing communities of practice online, the way that Amisha's doing, or whether you're developing them in reality in the place that you live, it's the growing strength that comes from your relationships. And from there, you might decide to step into politics. I think that's really what Amisha's talking about. And what happened in Frome was that they had a sort of citizens' action network there already before they decided to take over the council. And then they didn't give all their power to the council. What they did was they developed a partnership between the council and the people. And that's so the people continued to have a source of growing and becoming strong, and a relationship with someone who's also done that work in the council. So that's a whole new beginning in the sense of generating a politics from the ground up, but that could be happening at any level. I'm going to move over to, thanks, Pamjit. I'm going to move over to Dave. Dave's got a question for you, Misha. And then after Dave, just to say, we're going to go into breakout rooms and have a chance to discuss a question that Amisha's going to set in a second. But Dave, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for this talk, Amisha. And just to, before I ask my question, just to acknowledge the preciousness of what you're offering and the work you're doing. I just feel on a soul level just nourished by the fact that this topic is being aired at this moment, particularly in the global context. So just to honor and respect and give reverence for that. I was interested in terms of what was the kind of what has been the most breathtaking, awesome experience that continues to propel you on your journey and exploration of beauty?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, thank you for what you've shared. And I just have one thing on Pamjit's question I just want to say, which, as we were talking about Peter McFadden, like there's been so much interest in flat pack democracy, and so it's happening, like these things are all happening, and there is this lovely collaborative community vibe to it that's different, and so I guess we also just have to be patient with that whilst the current system that we know is not working kind of destroys itself, which is also happening. And so yeah, being able to sit with patience and an understanding of right timing is something that I've understood from yoga, actually. This question about like the most beautiful, breathtaking, awesome experience you've had, like I mean, there's so many that flash before my eyes. I don't even know where to start. And I think that's because being a human is a beautiful experience. You know, it is hard as hell at times, and we go through so many challenges along the way. But I mean, there's so many, from like meeting my niece for the first time to accompanying my father through his death, through, you know, that feeling of being in love and looking into someone's eyes, through a feeling when you see, I don't know, just like now I'm looking at like a willow tree blowing in the wind outside. Like I think that for me, I don't know about these sort of these moments or these experiences. Like, I used to have those stories, you know, and I used to tell people, oh yeah, well, when I was run over by this 4-wheel drive pickup truck, and then it's like, well, then something else happened, and then something else happened. And like, I had a conversation yesterday that changed who I am. And so I feel like I'm constantly in this relationship of experiences that connect me deeper to what's beautiful and what's meaningful about life and being here. And some of them can be kind of like, they're better like Hollywood stories. They're like, you know, dramatic, and they're like this moment, and others of them are really quite quiet. And yeah, so I don't know what it is. I think there's something, because that when I think back to, like, I guess my 20s, when I was quite like mired in like ego and in like trying to find my place and like do the right thing and show up and you know, change the world, I was missing everything, like on like the subtler kind of levels of my life, and I didn't have time for things that were really nourishing and important to me. And when I really took the time, but it's not like time as in I had to devote years to it, it's like just that I made space. When I really did that, to acknowledge the beautiful, and to say like that this is what's important, like this is why we're alive and this is what it's all about, what I've experienced is that I'm just more connected to that all the time. And so, you know, like this conversation is also, I was going to say feeding, but it's too transactional a word, because it's not like feeding, it's like it's expanding, you know, that that importance of why we're here, of why we show up, of what we're doing it for. And yeah, and of course I've had so many of those other moments, you know, whether it's meeting a kid, you know, on the other side of the world that doesn't have any access to anything, or all of these things that but I think we're surrounded by those moments and that information. And so I think it's just giving ourselves the permission to actually acknowledge that the personal is political, like it just is, and that the interconnectedness is also political, and that is the interconnectedness both in terms of a global capitalist system and the interconnectedness on a much deeper, you know, understanding of what interconnectedness is.
Thank you. Beautiful.
Thanks, Dave and Amisha. And we're going to go into our breakout rooms now. And Amisha, would you set a question for people to discuss? Of course, when you break out into rooms, please introduce yourselves briefly and say a little bit about where you come from. But then, Amisha, set us a question.
So the question that I feel is, what would you do differently in your life and in the way that you show up for society, for the future, if you really do believe in the beauty of your vision for this world?
Lovely. Okay, so what would you do differently, starting from today maybe, if you really believed in the vision, in your own beautiful vision of this world? I'm going to send you to breakout rooms now. You'll have, I'm going to say 15 minutes, and then we'll all come back and share information or about, or share whatever we'd like to share, or any more questions we have for Amisha. Thank you. We have an open space for the next 15 minutes. Who would like to, I think because I can see you all now, the best thing to do would just be to raise your hand if you're ready to speak. Either put a question to Amisha, which I'm sure Amisha you're still up for, or just share something that you yourself have to say or that you discovered or thought about while you were in the breakout room. Just be good to hear from you. Georgina.
Thank you. Could I just say one thing? Hi, Amisha. Gorgeous question. Beautiful. Because how often do we each ask ourselves, what is our vision of the world? Exactly as you were saying, Amisha, when you were with your ballot box. And, I think in our breakout group, it was great because we really sort of had to dust off what I did and maybe one other in our group did, to dust off what is our vision, what are we hoping for, because if you don't have that, what are you hoping to achieve? So that was really helpful. We had a great discussion. Two of the very lovely ladies in my group. So thanks for the question.
Thank you. And actually, I wonder if there's anything that you could share about your vision. I'm only inviting because there's a lack of vision, right? There's people are overcrowded with fear and signs of things breaking down. So if there's anything that you or anybody in your group would like to share about what your vision was, just briefly,
Of course. Thank you for asking. I just realized that my amazing, the power of these gorgeous questions. I really just realized that my vision is around people being happy to be engaged on environmental issues and to find the subject joyous and spacious, room for their ideas and room for them to be involved. My vision is very much about making people laugh about sustainability and the wider environmental issues. And I don't mean laugh, and ignore it, but laugh and then think, wow, there's so much here that I can bring to this. And now I understand it. So kind of using the medium of humor to entice people in to bring their gifts to the subject. But I really hadn't sort of consolidated that before or crystallized it, so it was really helpful. Thank you.
Thanks, Georgina. You would like to?
Shall I go?
Yes, Jim,
So just a bit of background, we had a good discussion on our group. Interestingly, we were reasonably close by, 2 from Edinburgh, 1 from North Berwick, me. I only got, I thought I was off the pace because I've only been into this in the last 24 hours. I saw a tweet from Pat Kane and I thought I would join. In terms of answering the question, for me personally, after discussion, what I said was, I'd like to leave. So I'm obviously, I'm recently retired. I would like to leave this place in a better space for the younger people, including my children. And how am I going to do that? And then I explained about working for organizations who have these visions and objectives and values, and how many organizations fully comply with them. But in terms of the same principle, I wrote down 4 words as Amisha was talking, and these words I am going to apply daily and be more challenging around the place constructively. And they were truth, equality, peace, and sustainability. Now, it's easy to write those things down, but in terms of my vision for the future, in terms of it being a better place, if I can stick to that, then I think that I could do my bit for the system to be better. So in the last 24 hours, I think I've come up with something that I can embrace. Okay, well, that's it.
Thank you so much, Jim. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. I can feel the power of that shift. Thank you.
Yep.
Somebody else like to offer something?
don't know how many groups there were. I was in Jim's group also and really enjoyed it. And also with Josie, as I say, we all seem to be from Scotland. But I did say that for some personal reason, God knows why, I'm sort of reasonably cheerful most of the time, no matter what has happened, because I've got this kind of notion that no matter how bad it is, you look at it and you go through it, and then somehow or other, I mean, almost like Georgina said, you start to laugh. I mean, how this is just being human, you know, this awful thing has happened to you. Like one of my son's close friends has died recently. I'm not laughing at that, but it's still something that is human and real. So we're talking together and sharing and those sorts of things, so that I don't feel down. But I know I meet people who do feel down, and that's a very different experience. So I do think that one of the things to talk about in the future is beautiful, is how do we look after the people who are on the edges, confronting the system we'd like changed. And we don't know who it'll be, because you meet it now and again. And there's backlash, or there's insidious undermining. I hope Jim doesn't meet it too quick whenever he tries to be truthful to somebody, but you never know what'll happen, you know. And it's how do we look after the people so that they can continue on the path they want to go to their vision. I think we need each other a lot.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, so
yes.
that's it from me.
Thank you so much, Elspeth. And
Yeah.
I've enjoyed your comments as well in the chat box. Thank you.
Oh, I got carried away a bit.
Very useful. Thank you. Parmjit.
I'd like to respond to that, because what Maria and I were talking about is how lonesome it can be when people around you haven't kind of got to the level of analysis that you have about what needs to change. So Amisha's comment about the fashion as a vehicle for change, I tried to introduce that into a project where they were doing a fashion show, and nobody really got it. So we're just going to do a fashion show to showcase skills, and that's going to be that. But Maria was saying something about an idea that you guys had of having like an open room where there would be somebody that you can just like click on the link and somebody would be there, and you don't even have to say anything, you can just carry on typing or whatever. And I thought that's a really nice idea, and you know, I think you've probably got enough people to sign on to shifts and stuff like that. But also I've done non-violent communication, so if people kind of wanted some kind of support, intervention type stuff, maybe we could think about, you know, how could we organise that?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's good. And I'd like to see how you pick it up and develop that idea, Parmjit.
Well,
yeah.
Do you want me to ask around for people who would be willing to be a person that would be, what's the word, like personing the shift?
oh.
Well, I'm going to invite Amisha to comment on that, but just let me just pad out a little bit what Maria and I were talking about, and it was partly because we were thinking that if we had a building, you know, if we were in a city and we had a building, that was always there. Alison, you and I will know about this. We used to have centres, but Alison and I used to be part of a Buddhist movement, and we had a centre. People could always drop in the centre, and there would always be like an open space there to work in, and you didn't need any attention. It was just you belonging to something. But it's difficult to do that when we're all in lockdown and we're socially distanced. And anyway, I can't be in all the cities. We can't be in all the cities that we're in. So we were wondering whether or not we couldn't develop a virtual equivalent of that and just have a permanent open Zoom room. And people could book rooms, you know, they only have to appear, and then they could go into a breakout room if they needed to have a meeting with someone. And it would more or less operate just like a normal centre, but it would just be virtual. So it's an idea that we're thinking about. I don't know if it would tax us too much but if we had, again, Ali, do you remember we used to have rotas of people, right, that would come and look after the front door of this thing. So, you know, Parmjit, if that's something that you're interested in seeing, if people are up for that, you know, in the end, a Zoom account is not the same as having to rent a building, right? It's quite a cheap equivalent, but lovely to think that it's always open and there and people can drop in. Maybe that's what's required for community building at the moment. But I'd quite like to ask Amisha, you've developed these communities of practice now with the people that you're in a sense leading, but in a sense you are also partaking in the community that you're building. How important is that to your resilience and continuing?
Yeah, I mean, it's everything actually. I think, like, yeah, I mean, I for some reason the Future is Beautiful always felt like a community thing rather than a like kind of top-down thing, and even like as a yoga teacher or like facilitator, I've always seen it as, you know, a circle, and you're bringing something, you're holding a space there, and during this year especially, one aspect of it is called presence, and it's you know, people pay a small amount per month, and we have these sessions. We have open kind of like an open space, like check-in circles, and we have impromptu Zoom dance parties, and like they've happened sort of naturally sometimes after we've talked for ages, and then I've just been like, oh, I feel like dancing, and then some people have stuck around, and we've just, you know, let our bodies move together, and it's been really fun. And we look at different themes each month that we explore that are relevant to the embodiment of the themes discussed in the podcast, which is very far reaching, but you know, I'm able to kind of distill them a bit, and we come into this community space where we're all in that journey of the embodiment, and for me, being able to hold that space allows me to further embody what is that I'm exploring, so that it doesn't all just isn't just heady concepts. You know, you have discussions, and then what, you know, for me, even the discussion is an experience where the discussion will change who I am, and so the community of care and practice is very much around that. And maybe Georgina can share, because she's part of these communities with me. But in our breakout room, and we were talking about this thing of, you know, that journey of like letting go of what people think in order to be more of who you are, and how we're so hardwired for tribe, you know, that's in our epigenetics, you know, it is part of what it is to be a human. And so when you have that realization that you can't, the cost of just fitting into what is around you is just too high for the stakes of what you believe in terms of your own vision, in terms of what's important. How much having community that is also making that decision is important. And I feel like, you know, in this conversation, that really clarified for me why I put in all that extra time and effort into creating that space, so that it's not just like people can listen to something, but actually that they can join something, or they know, even if they don't join it for whatever reason, they know it exists, and that they know that people are gathering from all over the world that also believe the same things. And so there is a sense of belonging, and that belonging, it can even just be that, you know, just that you know that this community exists where there are people of resonance, or it's something that you drop into, you send a message into every now and then, or it's something that you really show up at all the calls, but you know that you're part of it. And I get that happens a lot, even just for people that do listen to the podcast, because, you know, over 100 episodes, they're like, oh look, there's at least 100 people that are also doing this work, so I do belong with these people. And And so, yeah, I think that's really hit home for me today. I mean, I think we relearn the same things, don't we? We know why we do things, and then it's like and you're like, oh yes, okay, I can feel it at a different level of importance in the mirroring, in the community space that's happening here. And so for me, I feel a renewed sense of why it's important to offer that community space, and to be going on a journey, and how the virtual can really support at these times in particular, where like that virtual space is important, but just generally as well. And there's something kind of amazing about being able to connect globally, virtually, and to be able to be connected to people that are having very different but similar experiences, or to learn about how someone is doing something in another space, in another community, and then being able to take that information into your own. And so that really just I can really feel like more I feel like more energy in that for myself, which I'm going to take away from this time that we spent together. And also the thing that I got reminded of when you were all sharing is that another origin of where this project came from was that it can be so overwhelming because there's so many things. And so if you are like minded of wanting to make the world better than it is, of which everyone who's here is, it can be so overwhelming of like, well, how do you find your place in it? And are you doing enough? And all of these kind of questions. And so that's also a space that I've been kind of offering something in and around. And this exercise of the vision, and then like the how are you doing it, it's about finding your place within it. It's about being able to say, like, it's not that I don't care about all the other things or see the interconnectedness of all the other things, but here's me, and this is, one of the reasons why there's that question of like, what's inspired this? It's like, well, here's like my story. Here's what I've been given. Here's the skills that I have, the unique like ancestral perspective that I have, the ways in which I've grown up, the way that I can see the world. And through that, I can find my part in the puzzle. And then, and then we are able to trust in then, what happens when more of us do that, and we inspire each other to do that. And then, change does happen. It just does. And we are able to do it from a more resourced place, because whereas I might say like, yes, I wholeheartedly support like everything you're all doing, I don't have the physical energy to show up to all your meetings and to do all of that, and that's okay, that's okay as well. And so you can feel supported by me, and also like know that you're doing your part, and that what that is different for each one of us. And that's why that connection to our own intuition as well as our own vision is so key.
Thank you so much. And that's a great thing for us all to go home with, so to speak, if we're not already at home. We are already at home. Thank you so much, Amisha. And thank you, everyone else. We've come to the end of our allotted time. Great to spend time with you all.